Good morning, gardening friends. Today is Sunday, June 2nd, and Miss Mimi says hi. We're here in the front porch because I wanted to share the blossoms on my begonia. My torch begonia is doing really well. You can see the problem with it is it's kind of messy. Well, what's up? You can't go out in the front yard. You're going to have to wait. My apicia blossoms are still doing well, as are the coleus that I planted there. There's the other flower on my begonia. Let me get one more sip of tea before we go out. I don't ever let Miss Mimi go out in the front yard because she's not that fast anymore. You can't go out. Oh, in any event, let me show you what I did this last week. Actually, a lot has happened in the yard. I did a lot of weeding and clearing. Back in here, the ginger lilies that I planted are doing really well in that corner, and they survived the rains. We had some pretty heavy rains the last few days. I also planted a bunch of ferns at the base of them to fill that in. And the heavy rains running off the roof, I don't have gutters, didn't damage the ginger lilies at all, which is good. The bananas are already overhead. This leaf here is at the 6-foot level to give you some idea of height. It's a nice cluster of bananas. This fig has done really well this year. The actual green part of the fig, it's a standard, well, it's a tree. But the leafy part has pretty much doubled in 1 year. So it's not supposed to, last year it did nothing really. This year is the year it's supposed to creep, and next year leap. But in creeping, it's already grown, what, about 2 feet? So it's a good spot for it. It's a weak tree, however, so I noticed versus the leaves, hopefully these branches will thicken out and strengthen up, but every time we get a really heavy rain, it kind of weighs down the leaves, the branches. 4 o'clocks are still doing well underneath. I thinned all this out and weeded out all the weeds. I like the little ferns coming up here. Actually, 3 types of ferns. This is the fern that the birds gave me, right here. My arborvitae fern, there are actually 2 plants in there, has really spread with a vengeance. I'm letting it spread, but I had to cut back around this Japanese painted fern because the arborvitae is just too much of a thug for it. I have another painted fern over here. As an aside, I do like the color combination because the what do you call it? The ribs of the fern are purple and it matches the lower petalum nicely. This garden was just cut back. Still a little bit more work here to do. Oh, I see I'm starting to get some flowers on the liriope or lily turf. Back in here, everything was, the big shrubs were trimmed back. I kind of just trimmed the tops of the 4 tea olives, or osmanthus. They are a pain to trim. For one, because they're above my head. They're about 7 feet tall. But for 2, you can't really see the tops while you're cutting it. And there's my den window from which you can see the tops. So what I have to do to get them looking good from the den window is I trim think I've got it and then have to go inside and look out the window and see from the top if I got everything. I used to be able to do it with bringing a stepladder out here, but now there's so much other stuff there that I can't do that anymore. So it's just a pain. I only have to trim them once, maybe twice a year. But this is the spring trim. And I did want to be careful of those ferns. Those are, again, the wild ferns that the birds gave me, or something gave me. They are extremely delicate. If you glance at them too quickly, they'll break. So you have to be particular when you're working around them so that you don't bust them up. Loropetalums got hacked down quite substantially. Of course, I want them to be about 6 inches taller ultimately. That's why they're down so short. And now you can really see the structure of the white rose of Sharon. Of course, you can see I had to rope it up. In the winds that we get, even though it's up against a fence, it's usually on the wrong side. It's on the windy side. And the winds tend to splay it out at the top. And it looks more vase-shaped, which I don't want there. Back in here, now you can actually see leaf litter, which is good. Oh, I did tell a lie. I told you all that I was not going to trim my camellias this year, and I had to trim that one. It's in a little bit sunnier spot than all the others, and I just didn't want it being, I had to cut it back about a good 8 inches. I kind of wanted to keep it at least in the ballpark of these other camellias. This one's only about 6 foot tall, and that's a little shorter. This one is the shortest, but then it is the youngest of the camellias back here. It's my yellow camellia. That's only about 3 years old. And the oldest of my camellias is this Professor Sargent. That's probably about 15 to 20 years old. What about now? 7 to 10 years ago, I had big oak trees removed, and they had to drive a truck through here, a bucket truck, to get at the trees. So everything here was flattened, and they took the fence down. So all of these camellias were dug up, or not here then, and everything has been replanted since then. So all of the other camellias are relatively new compared to this one. And this one was huge. And I had a ginkgo tree in front of it. And when they brought the big trucks in, I said, please, whatever you do, don't damage those two things. And you'll never guess what got damaged. However, it wasn't the end of the world. I took the ginkgo out. I just decided it would have been too much anyway, and it's so slow growing that it was annoying. It grows annoyingly slow. Because I cut it back and it was just a stub, and it had a sprout on it, but it would probably take about 20 years to get to about 4 or 5 foot tall. And I don't have time for that. However, the camellia recovered nicely. So this garden has come together nicely. It's about as good as it's going to look. It's nice and open. I do like to keep airflow around the plants. The ligustrum hedge was trimmed back here. I only trim one side of it. I let the other side grow into the floppy camellia, azaleas on the outside. But this opens it up and keeps some good airflow there, keeping the chance for diseases, minimizing the chances for diseases. I won't say it keeps them at bay, because you still could potentially get them. However, they're less, since it's not quite as damp and humid around them. Well, not quite as damp there, stagnant around them. Okay, now you can see my palms a lot better. This Mediterranean fan got thinned out a little. I am going to take all the little shoots off from around the side. I want it to be a single trunk. I got most of them. And this one is my sable minor, which now really shines now that everything else has been taken out of it. It has a beautiful inflorescence. Here's the size of it. I mean, it's probably about 7 foot tall. It does like this spot. It's been in that spot quite a few years now. Only it kind of disappears because the ginger lilies take up the bottom of it, and the hedge takes up the back of it, and these hollies take up the sides of it. So kind of have to keep everything else trimmed and in its place in order for the palm to shine. But it looks good, as does my hydrangea, Limelight. I just shaped it a little bit by just trimming a little here where it got floppy. Did not break any branches. Yay! It does look like it's going to put on a spectacular amount of blossom this year. And I did my first prune on my cassia. I trimmed one branch right here, and you can already see new branches coming. And I don't like to trim all three at one level. I like to try and trim them at different times. And I will try to trim it at least one more time before I let it go for the fall. Cassias will be just a thin, wispy bush if you let them. And so I like to have them bush out a little before all of the tops start growing. It just makes them a little bit stronger and they look a little less wispy. Oh, I can see one of my Caladiums is starting to come up that I planted here. Hopefully y'all can see that. Loropetalum doing nicely. That is a bottomless pot. In other words, the bottom was cut out of that pot so it could root itself in the ground. That is a trick if you want something tall in a spot. So I cheated a little by planting it in the pot and then having the pot have no bottom, so that way it's not really a potted plant, it's growing in the ground. And here you can see I trimmed out all the stalks from last week that had bloomed and had died. I don't want it to set seed. And lo and behold, this week it set up a whole bunch more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more buds. So it's doing really well. It likes that spot. Good morning. And then over here, the antirrhinums are looking a little the worse for wear because of all the rains we got. I think we got about 2 inches of rain in the last 2 days. The blossoms are done on my opuntia. And truth be told, I learned something earlier today. This is the second attempt at this video. I went and touched one of the fruits when I was doing my first video and got a handful or a fingerful of thorns. And I figure I'm videoing, how am I going to take the thorns out? And I figured, well, let me try and bite them off with my teeth. Big mistake. Because some of the thorns transferred to my tongue. So needless to say, we aborted that particular run. I don't edit my videos. These videos are as they run. So that video was discarded. And let me tell you, a thorn in your tongue hurts from the cactus. Everything here is doing really well. It looks like my bee balm is about ready. Monarda, about ready to bloom. Not a lot of growth on the 3 okras, but they're not dead, so they will grow. These okras planted at the same time look a little taller. Oh, I see I have some blackberries coming. Those blackberries were planted this year, so I didn't expect anything. That dill is where I just brushed against the dill, and it's very fragrant. It's about probably done for the year. I've cut it back once, and I'll probably cut it back again, but I've got a feeling since it's gone to seed, it won't be coming back. It's done its thing. Back in here, my Australian tree fern. is looking like a tree fern now. The winds haven't bothered that this week. It wasn't as windy as it was a couple of weeks ago, although it was windy. And I did find in my backyard, which you'll see later, some more of this mock orange. I used to have it out by the street many years ago, and it still lingers on every now and then in my shrub beds. So I think I will dig up what's there and put one more over here, and I'll have 3 in a row, because there's a small one right there. This used to be, this whole area between our properties used to be a hedge of that. It's either called English dogwood or mock orange, and it got to be really tall, and for some reason one year it just all died out. Go figure. My datura, now that it has been moved out of the shade, is no longer being eaten. You can see the new leaves are pretty much bug-free, but where it was doing pitifully in the shade, it was stressed and its leaves were being eaten. Somehow I think the bugs can tell when a plant is stressed, and they pick on it more. There's my neighbor's bougainvillea in a pot blooming. Construction is pretty much complete on the outside of the house, so things are going well there. Sarah has said that they probably will be finished late this month, early next. This bunch I do like the look of, just the yellow and the green. I just wish this particular one was a little more aggressive. Let me pinch the flower off. Ouch. I did notice the winds twisted my satsuma tree. Let me get to the other side and I'll show it. I've always had trouble with the satsuma tree on the west side of my house, and I've cut it back to the stub a couple of times. I think I cut it to here one year, because if it's too floppy, the winds get it and twist it and turn it. And you can see right now, since I'm bonking my head as I walk through there, I probably need to thin out some of these low-hanging branches. However, if I do that, I'm going to lose all that fruit. So I think I may wait until the fall to do that. Some new growth coming on my Pieris japonica. If it was in the sun, that new growth would be more red. And I staked up my air potatoes that came up last year. They've been in the ground there now for, I think, 3 or 4 years. And they come back every year. I just put a stake on them for now. I haven't decided what I'm going to do. Last year I put another stake across the top. And I was debating whether to use, I bought a heavy rope. I was thinking of putting like a heavy rope along the top and swag it and just let it grow up the rope, but haven't decided. So when in doubt, use a stake. It can always be removed. But at least it got these air potatoes off of the ground, because they were starting, they will take over this whole neck of the woods if you let them. You have to keep them in check. Spider, not spider lily, so it's that spider flower, Cleome, is doing well. Looks about the same as last week. But there's a lot to be said for that in the heat of the summer, because we are approaching summertime weather. Oh, there we have a spider. A bashful spider. That side of the hedge still has to be trimmed. That's the one piece of this big camellia hedge that has not been trimmed, because I was waiting for the lilies to finish. And as you can see, the lilies are finished, as are, although there may be another flush of growth yet on the foxgloves. I did go ahead and plant the vincas that I bought last week. Put them here, the white vinca. And they have not wilted. That's the one good thing about vincas. They are very sturdy plants. Even right now we're getting 90-degree weather, so in the heat of the day it does get hot back here. course, you see the fruits on this tree. They're even smaller than the ones on the side yard. I think I am going to go ahead and take away some of the older blossoms and let that bush on the hydrangea, let that flop up again. As the blue fades, or ages, it fades to white and splotchy. Nothing wrong with that, I just don't like the shape of the flower. You can see my potted plants are still doing well. Lantana. Looks like I'm getting a second flush of leaves from my Gara. And all of my succulents have done fine. Looks like the birds have finally left this one alone. I did notice that the cardinals have left. They were the ones that did the damage on my papyrus. It's a little quieter. Here you can see the oldest blossom of the Nico blue. It'll actually turn a little pink and then this yellowy color, and then it'll turn brown. So I will go ahead and cut that off. I've got my fountains running so you can hear them going, gurgling in the background. This Serenoan repens has done really well. I trimmed out, it had a lot of dead, or what's the right word, browned fronds. And I went ahead and cut most of them out just to sort of dress it up. And here's the big change. This was the other area that I worked on this week. I got rid of the wild spiderwort. I didn't actually yank them out of the ground, I just snapped them off at the ground. Like, you can't really see any of the stubs. It's kind of like I did to this, just snap it off and it'll sprout back again. The tall spiderwort won't be back until next year. But it looks a lot more open now. It was okay before. It was just a little more wild look, and now it's a little more tamed for the summer. And I did plant a bunch of, since I had them, Caladiums. Bulbs, of course, are corms. You really don't see them yet. And I don't see anything sprouting, but they will. My plum has done really well. It is basically now as tall as my kumquat tree, so that's a nice pair. Annoyingly, it did not set any fruit this year. It had no flowers. This is only its second year here. But I kind of was hoping it might have some plums, but there's always next year. More of these wild ferns. And there's a little bit of weeds behind them, but you can't see it. That's Gary's rule number 1 of weeding. If you can't see them, don't worry about them. Just don't let them go to seed. So there are weeds back there, but the fern is so thick you really don't notice them. There's some lantana coming back from last year. Why did I come back here? Oh, I came back here because I am such a poor, what's the right term? Fanatic, I guess, for keeping my grass clear. I usually spray back here and weed whack, but we've not been doing a good job of weed whacking recently. And I happen to notice in the weeds, 1, 2, and number 3, make sure you saw them, actually one over there too, asparagus ferns for free. So I'm going to dig them out and put them somewhere. I have never had an asparagus fern in my backyard in 31 years. So I guess the birds spread them. However, since they're coming up, I will gladly transplant them somewhere. I also trimmed up these white jasmine. Now they're looking more like they should. Tamed. You see now more the floppy nature of the, what is this stuff? It smells good. Lavender. I let it be floppy. You have to be careful with lavender. If you keep it nicely clipped, sometimes you can kill it. So I kind of let it do its own thing and maybe only take about an inch or so off, or take the odd arm that shoots out. But I've learned to accept a little floppiness with my lavender. Back in here, I still haven't figured out what's going on this tree stump, which is right there. But you can see I cut back the bottle brush, so it opened up a spot for the pink angel's trumpet, so it's righted itself. It is now straight. And I went ahead, this one branch had bent out, so I went ahead and tied it to the tree, and it is now righting itself. So I will have a pretty pecan before you know it. I have been enjoying the blueberries. I have one or two left here. They are good. Very sweet now. I probably shouldn't do that while I'm talking. But everything here is doing well. The vincas in pots still look good. I do like the look of the red. The red and, well, really the white is what shows up. From a distance, yellow and white are the flowers that attract your attention the most. Red's kind of the next one, in my experience. There are strict rules to this, published in a lot of different books, with colors that recede like blues. When you plant them, you really don't notice them. But I like to say, in my experience, reds and yellows, or I'd say the whites show up the most, yellow next, and then reds from a distance. I must say that these Akaba look spectacular with the new yellow growth. I have two there, and then two over here. These are much older. However, for some reason, something got to that one last year. They are supposedly easy to root. I have not tried doing that. But I have four. I have two on this side of the corner and then two on the other side. I did do a lot of weed whacking here and trimming and edging to kind of get everything nice and ship-shape. I do have a yard man that does that for me. However, you know, no one can do it as good as you can. So I like to get out about every month or month and a half and do a good edging job so that everything's nice and tight and straight again. And here you can see already the caladiums I planted not but 2 weeks ago are coming up. Those are Cathleen's, not this speckled one, but the other ones. They were all planted just a couple of weeks ago, and they're absolutely huge, and you can see flower spathes already. Those are the ones that are fragrant. And these that I planted in the pots are coming up as well. I have a lot of caladiums. This is probably going to be the year of the caladium for me. And the white angel's trumpet that was back in there is dead. However, the cutting that I took, which is in my garage, has got about a couple inches of growth from the top. I'm going to wait maybe another week and then plant it out. Hopefully it'll grow faster than the slugs can eat it. These caladiums are also coming up. These are all furries. I planted just a cluster. 3 there, 3 there, and 3 there. I don't know what's digging holes here, but something is digging holes. The good news is that my wild cat, Liza, spends more and more time in my backyard. She likes to lay herself flat in these muddy patches, or dirt patches when it's not wet, and just look at me and look at everything else, and she's caught at least a mole. I know she's caught one of them, or vole, I couldn't tell. Unfortunately, she has found her new spot, and her new spot is up here, so she could peer in the window, which has not really boded well for this last cyclamen. I was surprised that these cyclamen on this end, let's see, no, it's got plenty of water, are sending up flowers. Typically they're dying this time of the year, so as long as they're still sending up flowers, I'm going to let them live. And here you can see my pitcher plant. Ooh, it's absolutely full of water. Doesn't quite need that much water in it. Nepenthes is doing really well. Actually, everything back here is doing well. This Nepenthes hasn't died yet. It's all you can say sometimes with new plants. And I'm surprised, although this is starting to look a little sad, it has spent, now I think it's 3 weeks in that pot. Considering it has no fine roots at all, it just has about 6 inches of a twig root, basically about the size, diameter of a quarter. Underneath it, it's doing pretty well. I did notice a couple more pots of my Caladiums have come up. I have to admit, potting these Caladiums like I did is really kind of a waste of time, considering they've been in that pot now, what, for about 2 or 3 months in those pots. And these have been in this pot for 2 weeks. The only thing is, the white Caladiums sell out quickly. So if I had not bought them, I would not have them. But I guess a key learning is maybe I probably shouldn't have planted them and just kept them as corms and planted them later. But you can already see, here is the blossom space of the, I guess it's got, what, 2 of them here? Of the Kathleen. And Kathleen does have a fragrance. And I'm leaving this for a little bit longer. This is my lettuce. It had lettuce leaves, and I'm letting it go to flower. And I bought a shrimp plant yesterday. I have never had a shrimp plant before, and I'm going to try growing one. And here you can see the bananas, of course, are still huge and looking good. Wind hasn't beat them down too badly. And my golden chalice vine is sprouting. I knew it would. It always looks pitiful till it starts sprouting. All of my herbs so far are doing well. And that sedum really likes, what I did here is underneath the sedum in this pot and in that pot are grape hyacinths. So when the grape hyacinths fade away, the sedum takes over. So it's kind of nice. You can leave the pots where they are and they look good all year round. Now here you can see the papyrus looks really good now. I took the stakes out of the center. Truth be told, I needed them for something. Oh, I needed them in the front yard for the ginger lilies that I moved. Roses are still putting out. Of course, in the heat now, the roses don't last the day. So when I see them as they are now here, that one is ripe for picking to bring in the house. And they'll last a few days in the house. They're extremely fragrant. That was the reason I bought those. Those are Oklahoma. They reminded me of my grandmother Sophie. She had a prize, really deep red rose that looked like that. It was called Crimson Glory. I don't think you can buy it anymore. But I remember as a child, she would take me by the hand when it would be blooming and say, oh, look at these flowers, smell them. So that's the reason why I have the red, and I love scented roses. Any color. Let's see what else is going on over here. Not an awful lot. The sedum keeps on growing. It looks really good. This lavender never does really well. It's a fragrant lavender. I think that's the name of it, fragrance something. It's got fragrance in the name. It never really gets looking better than that, but I'll take it. And my Sarracenias are doing well. This one is getting more and more pictures. I had someone ask about Sarracenias, and I use rainwater, and I have to top them off every day for both the Nepenthes and the Sarracenias. However, if you don't have access to rainwater, what you could do is you could use tap water, but let it age overnight. So get you a couple of buckets, one for one day and one for the next. And that way you'll always have a store or a stash of non-chlorinated water, because the chlorine will, I don't think it would kill the plants, but it would certainly stunt them. So there you have it for the day. Although it's still overcast, it's always a beautiful day in the garden, even if it's raining. I guess I'll leave you today with just a look out over the palms. So until next week, I hope you get out in your yards and your gardens and enjoy them. Take care.